Chapter 1. The Letter Without a Name. Tom Wilson lived alone in a quiet village. He was 65 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. His home was small but full of old things. There were pictures of his wife on the wall. Her name was Mary. She had passed away 5 years ago. Tom had loved her deeply. After she died, something inside Tom also became quiet. He did not laugh much after that. His children lived in the city. They called sometimes, but they were busy with their lives. Tom understood. He didn't complain. He just spent his days simply. He woke up early, made tea, and sat on his wooden chair. He watched the forest from his window. The forest was his old friend. He had worked there for 35 years as a forest officer. He knew every sound of the trees, every smell of the leaves, and every turn in the path. He still walked in the forest sometimes. It gave him peace. The trees never changed. They stayed with him, even when people didn't. That morning was cold. The wind was strong and the sky was gray. Tom wore his old sweater and walked to the door. He wanted to bring in some wood for the fire, but something strange was there on the ground. A letter. Just one small folded paper. There was no name, no stamp, nothing written outside. Tom looked left and right. No one was there. He bent down slowly and picked it up. The paper felt dry and soft, like it was written long ago. He opened it with care. The handwriting was rough but strong. The message said, "Dear Tom, do you remember the old forest cave? We need your help. Come soon. Time is short. Don't tell anyone." Tom froze. He sat down on the step and read it again. The cave. That word shook him. He had not thought about that place in many years. It was deep inside the forest, past the tall rocks, near the quiet waterfall. Long ago, he had gone there. Something had happened. Something that still lived inside his mind like a dream. He had never told anyone. Not even Mary. He had locked that memory far away. But now, someone had unlocked it. Who sent this letter, and why now? Tom felt the wind get colder. He held the paper tight. His hands were shaking. His eyes were full of questions. But there were no answers, only silence. He stood up and looked toward the forest. The trees were still, but he felt they were watching him. The air felt different. The quiet was heavy, like before a storm. He walked back inside and made tea. He sat in his chair, but he couldn't relax. The letter was on the table. His eyes kept going to it. He knew he could throw it away and forget, but he also knew he would not. Something inside him had already decided. He could feel it in his chest. The forest was calling him again, not just for a walk, not for peace, but for something else. Something lost, something waiting. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew he had to go. That evening he packed a small bag. A torch, a jacket, a bottle of water, and a picture of Mary. He always took her picture on long walks. Before sleeping, he opened the window. The wind touched his face. The trees stood tall in the moonlight. They were whispering to him. He couldn't hear the words, but he understood the feeling. Something had started. Something old. Tomorrow, he would go back into the forest, back to the cave, back to a story that had never truly ended. Chapter 2. The Woman in the Photograph. Tom did not sleep well that night. He kept waking up and looking at the clock. The wind outside was strong. The trees made soft, sad sounds in the dark. At midnight, he turned on the lamp and looked at the letter again. Then his eyes moved to a small photo beside the lamp. It was an old picture of Mary, smiling in the sunlight. But there was another photo behind it, half hidden, old, and bent at the corner. It was a photo he had not touched in years. Carefully, he took it out. It was not Mary. It was someone else. A young woman with long, dark hair and quiet eyes. Her name was Lena. Lena had been his friend many years ago, long before he met Mary. She was not from the village. She had come as a student, studying forest plants. She used to walk in the woods every morning with her notebook and her smile. Tom had met her during one of his rounds. They talked about trees, about birds, about the sound of rain. One day turned into many. They laughed together, shared lunch under the tall trees, and sat near the waterfall. Lena had dreams. She wanted to write a book about the forest. Tom liked her spirit. She was brave, kind, and full of life. He didn't say it, but he had loved her. But something happened. One day, Lena went into the forest alone to study some rare flowers. A big storm came that afternoon. She didn't return. People searched for days. Tom searched the longest. He walked every path, called her name, and went to the old forest cave. He remembered seeing a piece of her notebook near the cave's entrance, but the inside was dark and deep, too dangerous. He had waited for help, but no one came. After that, she was never seen again. People said she got lost. Some said she fell into the deep rocks. Tom had never spoken about it. He had carried that pain like a shadow for years. Later, he met Mary and started a new life. But Lena's memory stayed hidden in his heart. Now, after all these years, the cave was calling him again. And the letter said, "We need your help." Not I, not someone. It said, "We." Was Lena still alive? Or was it someone else connected to that day? The next morning, Tom packed more things. He took a rope, an old walking stick, and a small camera. He also packed both photographs, Mary's and Lena's. He wore his forest boots and green jacket. Before leaving, he looked at the house once more. It felt like he was going far away, not just into the forest, but into the past. The path was foggy. The trees looked different in the early light. Tom walked slowly. Each step was quiet. Birds flew above him, and dry leaves made soft sounds under his boots. The forest was alive, but it felt like it was watching him. After an hour, he reached the old stone wall. Behind that wall, the cave path started. It was a narrow path with sharp turns. He had not walked it in 20 years, but his feet remembered. His heart remembered. He walked deeper and deeper. Suddenly, he stopped. There was a mark on the tree, a small red cloth tied to a branch. His heart jumped. This was Lena's sign. She used to tie cloth to trees so she could find her way back. No one else knew that. He touched the cloth gently. It was old, but still strong. Then he heard a sound. light footsteps far ahead. He looked, but saw no one, just shadows between the trees. Someone was there. Tom kept walking. The cave was near now. The trees became taller, the light became less. And then in front of him stood the cave. It looked the same, dark, wide, and cold. He stood there for a long time. His hands were sweating. Then he stepped forward. One slow step, then another. Inside the cave, he turned on his torch. The light showed wet stones and quiet walls. The sound of water echoed from deep inside. Tom walked carefully. He called, "Hello? Is anyone here?" His voice bounced back to him. Silence followed. Then, suddenly, a soft voice replied, "Tom?" He turned fast. His light moved, and there, standing near the rock, was a woman. Her hair was dark. Her eyes were calm. She looked older, but her face was familiar. "Lena?" Tom whispered. She gave a small nod. A tear rolled down her cheek. Tom dropped his bag and stepped closer. The past was not gone. It was standing in front of him, and this time, he would not walk away. Chapter 3. What was never said. Tom stood still. The cave felt quiet, but his heart was loud. He looked at the woman in front of him. She looked tired, older, but her face was the same. It was Lena. Her eyes were full of pain, but also full of light. For a moment, both of them said nothing. The past was standing between them. So many years had passed, but the silence was still strong. Tom took one step forward. His voice shook as he said her name again. "Lena, is it really you?" Lena gave a small smile. It was weak, but warm. She sat down on a rock, and Tom sat near her. The torchlight made their faces look soft and old. Lena looked into Tom's eyes and said, "I thought you forgot me." Tom shook his head. "I never could. I didn't know what happened to you." She looked away and took a deep breath. Then she began to tell her story. That day, long ago, when she went into the forest alone, she was following a trail of wild plants. She had found a new kind of flower and wanted to study it. But a sudden storm had come. Heavy rain, strong wind. She lost her path. Then she slipped and fell near the rocks. Her leg was hurt. She could not walk, but she saw a small way into the cave and crawled inside to stay safe. She waited for someone to come. She thought Tom would find her, but no one came. For 2 days, she was alone in the cave. On the 3rd day, a group of local travelers passed nearby. They found her and helped her. But she had no way to go back to the village. Her head was injured, and she forgot many things for some time. They took her to a town far away. There, a kind woman helped her heal. Time passed. Her memory returned slowly, but she didn't go back. "I was afraid," she said softly. "I didn't know if I was strong enough to face the past." Tom listened quietly. His heart felt heavy. He wanted to say so many things, but no words were enough. So he held her hand. It was cold, but strong. "I thought you died," he said, "and I blamed myself every day." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I thought you left me," she whispered. For a long moment, there was only silence. But it was not painful anymore. It was soft, healing. Tom looked around the cave. "Why now?" he asked. "Why the letter?" Lena looked at him and smiled sadly. "I came back last month. I walked the forest paths again. I wanted to leave something behind, a truth, a goodbye, or maybe a beginning." She pointed to a small box near the rocks. Inside it were her old notes, some pictures, and a map of forest paths. She had come to finish what she started years ago. Tom felt a strange peace inside. So many years had passed, so many moments lost. But now, here they were, together again. Not as young people, but as two hearts still beating for each other. The cave was no longer dark. It had given something back: hope, truth, maybe love. Tom stood up. "Let's go home," he said. "There's tea waiting on my stove." Lena smiled. "You still drink tea every evening?" He nodded. "Some things never change." She laughed softly, and the sound filled the cave like sunlight. They walked out of the cave, step by step, side by side. The forest waited for them, quiet and green. The trees did not speak, but Tom felt something in the wind. It was not just a whisper. It was a promise. Chapter 4. The Walk Back to Life. The air outside the cave felt different now. The forest was the same, yet something had changed. Tom and Lena stood quietly for a moment, listening to the soft wind in the trees. The light was golden, falling through the branches, making everything look peaceful. But their hearts were full of emotions. For Tom, it felt like a piece of his heart, which had been missing for years, was suddenly back. For Lena, the forest no longer felt like a place of fear. It felt like a place where pain was turning into peace. They looked at each other. No one said anything. There was no need. They both knew this was not just a walk back home. It was the beginning of something they had lost long ago. Tom walked slowly. His legs were a bit tired, but his steps felt light. Lena walked beside him. Her body was weaker than before, but her spirit was calm. As they walked through the narrow path, trees moved gently above them. Birds made soft sounds. Dry leaves crunched under their feet. It was the same path they had once walked when they were young. But now everything had deeper meaning. Every tree, every stone, every turn reminded them of the days they had spent together long ago, before the storm, before the silence, before life had taken them away from each other. After some time, Tom stopped. He looked at a large tree with a wide trunk. "Do you remember this?" he asked. Lena smiled and nodded. "This was the tree where we carved our initials." Tom moved closer and brushed away the moss. The marks were still there, faded, but alive. T+L, it said. Just 2 letters, but they carried a whole world of feelings. Lena touched the tree gently. "I used to think about this tree when I was far away," she said. "It reminded me that something real had happened here." Tom placed his hand over hers. "Something real is still here," he said. Their fingers stayed together on the tree for a few seconds. Then they continued walking. As they moved deeper into the forest, the path became wider. The sounds of the forest grew louder, birds calling, wind rushing through the leaves, the gentle sound of a stream nearby. Tom pointed toward the stream. "We can rest there," he said. They walked to the water's edge and sat down on a flat rock. The water was clear and cold. Lena removed her shoes and placed her feet in the stream. Tom did the same. They sat silently, side by side, letting the cool water wash away their tiredness. "Do you remember the day we made tea here with river water?" Lena asked. Tom smiled. "Yes, you said it was the best tea you ever had." Lena laughed. "It really was." They talked for a long time, not loudly, not quickly, just slowly, like people who had waited too long to speak. They talked about small things, her life in the faraway town, his days after Mary died, the little joys, the quiet pains, the books they read, the songs they remembered. And between these soft words, they also sat in silence. But this silence was different now. It was not heavy. It was warm, comfortable. Like the silence of two people who understand each other without needing to speak. As the sun moved slowly above them, Tom took out the two photos from his pocket. He placed them on the rock. One was of Mary. One was of Lena. "These two women shaped my life," he said. "One gave me family. The other gave me dreams." Lena looked at both photos for a long time. Then she said, "And both gave you love. That's something not many people receive in one lifetime." Tom nodded slowly. "And I lost both. But now, maybe I've found something again." Lena's eyes met his. "So have I." They stood up and began walking again. Now the path was brighter. The trees opened up and sunlight fell fully on the trail. They reached the place where the old wooden bench still stood, half broken, but still standing. "We used to sit here after long walks," Tom said. They sat down again, even though it creaked under their weight. Lena leaned back and closed her eyes. "Tom," she said, "do you believe people get second chances?" Tom looked at her and said softly, "I didn't, but now I do." The walk continued. They passed the tall rock where they once painted their names with forest colors. The paint had long gone, but the memory stayed fresh. They passed the old bridge made of wood and rope. It looked too weak to walk now. So they sat near it and ate the small sandwiches Tom had packed. Lena looked at the clouds above and said, "I used to dream about clouds. I wanted to fly in them, write books under them." Tom smiled. "Maybe you still can." She laughed. "Maybe I can, if you promise to walk beside me sometimes." "Always," he replied. The forest was behind them now. They were near the village. Tom's small house was visible from the path. Smoke was coming out of the chimney. He had kept the fire ready. "Do you want to stay for a while?" he asked. Lena looked at him and said, "I don't want to leave just yet." They walked to the door. Tom opened it slowly. The smell of old books and warm tea filled the air. It was quiet, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. Inside, Lena looked around. "It's the same," she said. "You've kept everything just the way it was." Tom nodded. I was afraid to change it. I thought if I moved even one photo, the memories would run away. She smiled and sat near the fireplace. Tom made tea. They sat together, drinking slowly, watching the fire dance in the dark room. That night, they didn't speak much. Tom gave Lena the guest room. She walked in, looked at the small bed, the window, and the old lamp beside it. She felt safe. She felt home. Before sleeping, she stood at the window and looked at the forest. The trees stood still like quiet friends guarding a secret. She whispered, "Thank you," and closed her eyes. Tom sat near the fire for a while. He looked at the chair where Mary used to sit. He looked at the photo of Lena he had kept hidden for so long. He felt no pain now, just peace. Two parts of his life had finally met. The past was not broken anymore. It was whole. Outside, the wind moved slowly through the leaves. The stars looked down on the village. And in one small house, two hearts rested. One story had ended long ago, but now a new one was just beginning. Chapter 5. Rain and Memories. The next morning the sky was gray. A soft rain had begun to fall before sunrise. Tom opened the window and took a deep breath. The air smelled fresh, wet earth, green leaves, and a little bit of smoke from nearby chimneys. The village always felt quiet on rainy days, but today there was something more. The world outside looked soft, like a painting made of water and light. It reminded Tom of childhood mornings when his mother would make him sit by the window and drink warm milk as she told stories. Those simple moments had stayed with him all his life. Rain always made people remember things, and today, memories were everywhere. Lena stepped out of the guest room, wearing one of Mary's old shawls. It fit her perfectly. She looked different today, rested, peaceful. The lines on her face had softened, and her eyes were calmer. She looked at Tom and smiled. "It's raining," she said. Tom nodded. "Do you like the rain?" he asked. She laughed gently. "I love the rain, always have. But I never liked being alone in it." Tom handed her a cup of tea. "You're not alone today." They sat together near the window. The rain touched the glass like soft fingers. Birds stayed quiet. Trees moved only a little, like they were listening to something old and gentle. "It's strange," Lena said, "how the world slows down when it rains. It feels like time stops for a while." Tom agreed. It gives us space to think, to feel, to remember. After tea, Tom opened a small wooden box. Inside were old photographs, postcards, coins, and one very old radio. He placed the radio on the table and turned the knob gently. It made a crackling sound, then found a voice, an old Hindi love song from the 1970s. The music filled the room softly. Lena smiled with surprise. "You still listen to this station?" Tom chuckled. "It's the only one that works properly here. And yes, some things never change." They listened for a while, both lost in their own thoughts, but connected by the music. As the song played, Lena stood up and looked at the bookshelf. She picked up a small notebook. Inside were Tom's handwritten notes. Some were about trees, some were about life, but some pages were poems. "You write poems?" she asked, smiling. Tom looked shy. "Only sometimes. Only for myself." She read one softly. "A path once walked can call again. Through storm and night, through loss and pain. But if the wind still knows your name, then hearts can meet and love remain." Lena closed the notebook slowly. Her eyes were wet. "You wrote this after I left?" Tom nodded. "I didn't know if I would ever see you again, but I couldn't forget." She held the notebook close to her chest for a moment. Then she said, "Let's go for a walk." Tom looked at the rain. "Now?" She nodded. "Yes, let's walk in the rain, like we used to." He smiled and stood up. He took out 2 long coats from the cupboard and handed one to her. They stepped outside together. The path was soft and wet, but their steps were steady. The forest near the village was quiet. The rain was light, just enough to kiss the leaves and touch their faces. They walked without hurry. Trees on both sides stood tall like old friends watching their return. Small puddles formed on the ground. Lena stepped into one playfully, like a child. "Do you remember when we used to race to the waterfall?" she asked. "Yes," Tom smiled. "And you always won. You had lighter feet." "No," she laughed. "You just let me win." They reached the old swing hanging from a banyan tree. It was still there, though the rope looked weaker. "You pushed me on this once," she said. "And you fell backward," Tom added. They both laughed. They sat down on a rock nearby. Rain fell on the leaves above them, making a soft rhythm. Tom reached into his coat pocket and took out 2 boiled sweets. "Your favorite," he said. "Orange flavored." Lena's eyes lit up. "Where did you find these?" "In the old shop across the street. They still keep them for people like us." She took one and held it in her mouth like a treasure. "I feel young again," she said. "You never stopped being young," Tom replied. They walked further and reached the village pond. The water was full, and the rain made little circles on its surface. Ducks floated quietly. "You know," Lena said, "when I was in that far town, I used to dream of this pond. I thought, if I ever come back, I will sit here with you again." Tom looked at her. "And here you are." She nodded. "Yes, here I am." There was a long silence, not empty, but full of memories, of old dreams, of things not said. Back at the house, they changed into dry clothes. Tom made soup, simple vegetable soup with herbs from the garden. Lena helped him. They moved slowly but smoothly, like 2 hands of a clock working together. In the quiet kitchen, the smell of warm soup and fresh coriander filled the air. "This feels like a home," she said. "It is," he replied. "It always was. It just waited for you." They ate quietly. Then they sat near the fireplace again. Tom brought out a chessboard. "Do you still remember how to play?" Lena smiled. "Let's find out." They played slowly. Each move was calm. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just looked at each other. And slowly, something old became new again. Not loudly, not quickly, but gently, with care and warmth. That night, as rain still fell on the roof, Lena sat at the window. She wrote in her notebook, the one she had kept during her forest research, now full of new pages. "Today," she wrote, "I found myself again. Not in a city, not in books, but in a small house near a forest, beside a man who never stopped waiting." Tom sat in his room, writing in his own notebook. He looked at the photo of Mary, then at Lena's shawl resting on the chair. He smiled softly. "Love comes in many forms," he wrote. "Sometimes it leaves. Sometimes it returns. But when it returns, quietly, with rain and old songs, it feels like a gift you never expected, but always hoped for." Outside, the rain slowly stopped. The stars came out again, and the trees whispered once more, not of loss, not of pain, but of life, love, and second chances. Chapter 6. The Festival of Light. The village looked different that evening. Small lamps had been placed outside every door. Soft golden lights flickered along the narrow paths. Children ran with candles in their hands, laughing and calling to one another. Elders sat on chairs outside their homes, sipping tea and watching the sky slowly turn orange. It was the Festival of Light, a yearly event in the village that celebrated the end of the rainy season and the beginning of peace and hope. Tom stood near his window and watched quietly. The festival had always been a beautiful time, but he hadn't joined in since Mary died. For 5 years, he had watched from inside, always close, but never truly part of it. This year felt different. He wasn't alone. Lena stood beside him, helping him light small diyas, placing them carefully on the porch. The firelight reflected in her eyes, and Tom thought she looked like a memory brought back to life. "Do you want to walk through the village tonight?" Tom asked softly. Lena turned to him, smiling. "Yes, let's walk." They stepped outside, and a warm breeze touched their faces. The smell of flowers, incense, and fresh sweets floated in the air. The village came alive in a way that only happened once a year. Old friends met again. Songs played on the radio from every open window. Colorful lanterns hung from trees, and laughter danced through the streets. For the first time in many years, Tom felt like he belonged again, not just to a place, but to a moment. As they walked slowly along the path, people looked up and smiled. Some children ran up to Tom, calling him Uncle Forrest, like they used to. "Uncle, will you tell us a story again this year?" a little girl asked. Tom knelt down and gently touched her cheek. "Tonight is full of stories, my dear," he said. "Look around. The lights, the songs, the smiles, everything is a story." Lena looked at him, her heart full. She saw how the village respected him, how even in silence he had remained part of their lives. As they passed the tea stall, the old shopkeeper, Mr. Raghavan, waved. "Tom, you've come out this year?" Tom smiled. "Yes. And this time I brought someone back with me." Mr. Raghavan looked at Lena and nodded warmly. "Good to see you again, madam. The forest brings back its own." They stopped near the central courtyard where villagers had placed a large lamp tower. Children were sitting around it, listening to an old man playing the flute. The sound was soft and magical. Lena sat beside the children, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Tom stood beside her. The music brought memories of long forest evenings, of walks through the leaves, of dreams once lost. But it didn't hurt now. The memories felt soft, like the music itself. Later, they went to the sweet stall. Tom bought 2 pieces of warm jalebi and handed one to Lena. She took a bite and laughed. "Still the best in the world," she said. Tom smiled. "I told you this village never forgets how to make hearts sweet." They walked toward the open ground where people were lighting sky lanterns. One by one, the lanterns floated up, small flames carrying people's wishes into the stars. Lena watched quietly. Then Tom gave her a lantern. "Make a wish," he said. She closed her eyes, held the lantern gently, and whispered something no one else could hear. Together, they released the lantern into the sky. It rose slowly, joining dozens of others. "What did you wish for?" Tom asked. Lena looked at him and said, "Not a wish, a thank you." As they walked back home, the stars above seemed brighter. Their hands brushed once or twice, but neither pulled away. They didn't speak much. The silence between them had grown comfortable, full of trust and care. When they reached the house, Lena stopped and turned. "Tom," she said, "do you think people like us can still begin again?" Tom looked into her eyes. "Yes," he replied. "Not because we forget the past, but because we carry it with love." Inside the house, the fire was still warm. Tom poured 2 glasses of warm milk with cardamom, just like Mary used to do. They sat beside each other and sipped slowly. Outside, one last lantern drifted upward, its light steady in the night sky. That night, Lena wrote in her notebook again. "Today," she wrote, "I didn't just walk through a festival. I walked through my heart's memories. I saw what was broken, now whole again. I felt alone once, but today, I felt held." Tom wrote just one sentence in his notebook. "Love is not always loud. Sometimes it walks beside you, quiet as a flame." Chapter 7. The Promise. Under the banyan tree. The morning after the festival, the village felt quiet again. The lanterns were gone, the lights had dimmed, and the streets were peaceful. But something inside Tom had stayed bright. He stood in his garden, watching the birds fly low through the trees. The ground was still a little wet from the night before, and the air was fresh with the smell of flowers and old earth. Lena came out with 2 cups of tea, just as she had every day since she arrived. They didn't need to say much anymore. Their steps, their glances, their silences, all of it spoke clearly now. They drank their tea slowly, sitting on the wooden bench in the garden. "You know," Lena said after a while, "when I left all those years ago, I thought I had lost everything. But I didn't. I had memories. I just didn't know how strong they were until I came back." Tom looked at her, his eyes warm. "I never forgot," he said. "Even when the days felt too long and the nights too quiet, I still hoped, somewhere, that I would see you again." Later that day, they decided to visit the banyan tree. It stood at the edge of the forest, strong and wide, its branches hanging low like gentle arms. It had always been their favorite place. When they were young, they used to sit under that tree after long walks. They would talk, dream, and sometimes say nothing at all. The tree had listened to their laughter and their silence. Now, after so many years, they were going back. The walk there was slow, but beautiful. The sun filtered through the trees, falling in golden patches on the path. Butterflies danced across flowers. A squirrel ran across their trail. "This place hasn't changed much," Lena said. "But we have," Tom replied softly. "We're not the same people who walked this path years ago." Lena smiled. "No, we're not. But maybe that's a good thing. We're softer now, quieter. We've learned how to listen." When they reached the tree, they stood for a moment without speaking. The tree looked just as they remembered, strong, wide, peaceful. Its roots spread like old veins across the ground, deep and sure. Lena walked to the base of the tree and touched the bark. "This tree never moved," she whispered. "It waited, just like you did." They sat down on a smooth rock under the tree's wide shadow. The air was cool and calm. Tom took a deep breath. "Lena," he said, "I want to ask you something, but only if your heart is ready." She looked at him quietly, waiting. He took a small box from his pocket. It wasn't a ring. It wasn't jewelry. It was a key, a simple old key to his home. He placed it on her palm gently. "I don't want to rush anything. I don't want to break the peace we've found. But if you ever want to stay, not just visit but stay, this key is yours." Lena stared at the key. Her eyes filled with tears, not because of sadness, but because of the simplicity, the quiet truth of what it meant. She held the key tight in her hand. "This is the most beautiful question I've ever received," she said. "And the answer is yes. I'm not here just to remember. I'm here to live again." Tom smiled, and for the first time in years, he felt his chest rise with a joy that didn't hurt. He leaned forward and placed his forehead gently against hers. No loud words, no promises shouted, just two quiet hearts making a new path together. They sat under the banyan tree until the sky turned orange. The leaves above rustled in the wind like old friends nodding in approval. A bird sang a soft tune, and Lena hummed along. "Do you still write poems?" she asked. Tom laughed softly. "Only when my heart doesn't know how else to speak." "Then write one for me," she said. Tom looked at the sky, at the tree, at her, and spoke. "We are not new, but we begin again. Not in youth, but in wisdom's light. You returned, like rain to dry ground, and I grew roots while waiting." Lena wiped her eyes and said, "That's the only love poem I ever needed." They stood up, holding hands, and began walking back slowly. The world didn't look different, but everything inside them had changed. They weren't returning to the past. They were stepping into something new, something built with memory, care, and quiet strength. That night, they cooked dinner together. They played soft music on the old radio and danced slowly in the kitchen, barefoot and smiling like children. Outside, the banyan tree stood tall in the distance, and the stars above it watched quietly. two old hearts had made a new promise, not with rings, not with big words, but with tea, trees, time, and a key. Chapter 8. A New Season begins. Weeks passed gently. The days grew warmer. Flowers returned to the village gardens and birds sang from the rooftops again. Inside Tom's small house, life began to feel full. Not busy, not loud, but full in a quiet, warm way. Lena had not just stayed, she had made it a home. She arranged books on the shelf, added fresh flowers in old cups, and started writing again in her forest notebook. Tom cooked more often, sometimes from her recipes, sometimes from memory. They shared tea every morning and soft talks every evening. Some days were silent, some were full of stories. Every day was enough. They walked often, not just in the forest, but through the village too. Children smiled when they saw them. Old friends stopped to chat. People no longer looked at Tom with pity or sadness. They saw a man who had lived, who had waited, and who had now been blessed with love again. A slow, kind, understanding love, the kind that does not rush, but stays. One evening, as they sat under the banyan tree once more, Tom held Lena's hand and said, "This tree saw our beginning, and now it watches us live the part we never got before." Lena smiled, rested her head on his shoulder, and whispered, "And we'll give it a beautiful ending." The wind moved gently through the leaves. The past had made peace with the present. The forest no longer felt like a place of pain. It had become their shelter again, a witness to a love that had waited, wandered, and returned. They stayed there until the stars came. No more words were needed, just the quiet, steady sound of the trees whispering around them. And so, a new season began. Not young, but true. Not perfect, but full.